And welcome to another Biddle on Saturday, October 5th, 2019. How's everybody doing?
Doing really well.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
I love it. Can we get a sound check from somebody to make sure we're on the right stream, in the right chat, and sounding good?
Check, check, check. 1, 2, 3.
I think we are. I heard myself.
Yep, sounded okay here.
And there's Popey, who joins just in the nick of time. All right. So I wasn't planning on, well, I was trying to be here, but I said last week I probably wouldn't make it. But plans changed, so I was able to make it. So here I am. You'll have to deal with it if you don't like it. Oh, well.
Sounds good to me.
I'm good with it.
I'm fine. Yeah.
Are you sure? Okay.
I think so.
All right. We are trying out Manjaro 18.1.0 this week for the next 2 weeks, and we're going to talk about it. So this is their new release, or their latest release. I was talking to Philip and Bernhard on Twitter, and I'm hoping to get to see them guys on either, maybe, probably not tonight or the following 8 o'clock show, but maybe on the Biddle Europe show, which is a better time for them to come on. And if that happens, we'll end up giving them a lot of time to talk about Manjaro, what they're doing with it, and we'll take everybody's questions for them and give them to them. So, but for tonight, until then, we're going to talk about our experience with it. So, PZ, you want to take it away?
Yep, I can do. I've been a Manjaro user probably for 2 or 3 years now, as much as I'm any distro user, because my machine has got so many different distros on it that goodness knows how many times that I can't really say, I mean, other than the PEP, I can't really say I use it for a long, long time. But I've kept on Manjaro for most of this week, and I'm happy to report it's superb. I'm using the KDE Plasma version. I love the way KDE does HIDPI. It's very simple to do. You just set your font size and set the scaling. So I set mine to 1.3, and boom, we're up and running. Everything works. Everything's updating okay. Nothing's crashing. Everything's running silky smooth. So yeah, gets a double thumbs up from me, and I love it.
Well, are we turning you into a KDE user, Seb?
Do you know, I was looking at it the other day. I think I've probably got 8 or 9 OSs on my system at the moment. 6 of them are KDE. I think I might be turning into a KDE user. But just for the record, KDE and PEP just don't work. I've never managed to get it even remotely looking good. So yeah, it probably won't ever happen to that. But yeah, I think it could almost be my go-to now if XFCE wasn't so good.
Dig it. Derek, did you get to try Manjaro?
I haven't had a chance yet, but I have used it in the past for over a month and tried the beta of 18.1, which I enjoyed the experience I had of being able to choose which Office product I got to be able to use on my system. I really will get some more time with it later this week, though. I'm loaded on my laptop.
Well, it's funny you mention that because I purposely picked the other one and not LibreOffice. Just because.
How'd you like it?
Just trying to be a rebel. I had used it before. It was being on Windows. I had a license for it, so a long time ago, and yeah, it's fine for me. So, all right, Nate, sir.
No, I'm gonna have to punt that to next week.
Gonna punt it to next week. Okay.
Yes.
Dan, are you punting?
I am, but I'm going to say that in the last year and a half, it's the only other distribution that I ran kind of full time. But it's been over a year, so I am going to test it. I did one of the release candidates a little while ago, and for some other testing purposes, so I really didn't get into it very much. But I do plan to. I have the ISO, and I'll try to get to that this week.
It's not like you were doing anything else this week.
I had a few other things going on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Like personal messages from me saying, "Why haven't you done this? And why haven't you done that? And please, can you have a look at this?" And
Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah, I did. I
Okay.
did. I did
Here we
some
go
stuff
with
there,
Zeb
too.
again. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it was all good.
Same old, same old. Yeah. Aris, you are up, my friend. Have you had a chance to look at Manjaro yet?
Yes, I downloaded it. I downloaded several versions. I downloaded the Plasma one, the XFCE, and i3, and the Awesome one. I usually don't download different versions, but I felt this time just to try them out. I installed the Awesome one and the i3 one, and then I booted into them, and I got kernel panic. And I discovered that apparently, because I have Debian installed as my default OS, and I'm dual booting with them, and I found out that you can't have Debian or Ubuntu GRUB.
I think your mic is on auto connect, Aris, because you've just gone down to ridiculous levels.
Oh, I have? Oh. Do I sound better now?
A bit louder.
You can continue, dude.
Okay.
It's all good.
Okay. Well, so I got kernel panics with them, and I'm not sure if it was. I wasn't sure if it was because they're not community distros or not. But then I found out that because I wasn't using the GRUB from Manjaro, you gotta use the GRUB from Manjaro. Otherwise, you can't use the Debian one or the Ubuntu one for it. And after I did that, after I had Manjaro use the GRUB to control it, they worked fine, except for the Awesome one. The Awesome one I think is a little out of date. That one has like problems. There was like some error I couldn't get it working. I'm not sure what was wrong with it. And I like the Plasma one. The Plasma one seems very nice, very light. Not a lot of extra things put in. And the i3 one, I'm not really that knowledgeable on window managers. I tried getting the sound working on that one, but I couldn't. So, but I'm still gonna test it out for the next coming week. But overall, after I got that working, I liked everything. The only thing I didn't like was that there's they turn on the PC speaker for notifications. I don't like that at all. I don't know why they do that, or if it's just my hardware. I really hate that. I wish they would turn that off.
Cool. Just to give you a quick heads up on the GRUB situation. I don't know why, but I discovered years ago that Manjaro writes the GRUB entry line completely differently to any other distro. So what you have to do is, if you want to keep Debian or Ubuntu, is when you're in Manjaro, copy and paste it somewhere else, but go into the GRUB CFG and grab the top section that first starts to mention menu entry Manjaro. And then when you get into Debian or Ubuntu, go into etc. grub-d and put that entry into the 40_custom file. And then what will happen is you'll get an entry right at the bottom, which will just say Manjaro or however you've described it. And then you'll be able to use that to boot. You'll end up with two entries in there, one that Debian finds or Ubuntu finds and places there. But then you'll have your own entry at the bottom. And in that way, you can keep your Debian GRUB entry.
Thank you.
There's a little bit on Telegram about it, or not Telegram, on Discourse, Big Daddy Discourse. I wrote my longest blog yet on Manjaro, and I think I mentioned that in there.
Yeah, spoken like a normal user.
Yeah, just like a normal everyday user, not an advanced user at all, right?
As a
Shush, you
general
guys.
note, though, like kind of
Sorry.
the whole point of UEFI is that you don't have to use systems like these, so you should just be booting into like the entry from the UEFI anyway.
I'm
So,
on
like-
I'm on a master boot record that I have a BIOS.
Oh, okay, so it's legacy then.
Yeah. But I mean, I understand exactly where you're coming from, Shiking, but the annoyance for me with that is as my machine boots up, I have to press F8 to get my EFI list or make the distribution I want to be first. But then there's very, very few that use EFI without GRUB. So you end up at a GRUB screen anyway. So that would still apply. Tyler, Good evening.
Hey.
Welcome back. And have you tried Manjaro?
So a few weeks ago, a friend and I were having a discussion, and we were giving Manjaro Gnome a try. I am unsure if it is the latest one that came out recently, but the thing, it was the install process was easy. Cool that you could select the Office suite that you want. Gnome, it was Gnome. It was cool. They provided some mainstream extensions out of the box. The one thing that I found annoying and that I'm going to comment on is I'm not a fan of the default tool for managing snaps and flat packs. It just feels like something out of 10, 15 years ago. It feels like something that could be functionality that could be integrated into a PA Mac. And so what I ended up doing is just pulling in GNOME software and installing the necessary packages to get Flatpak and snaps working with GNOME software.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Other than that, you liked it?
Yeah, other than that, I liked it. It was just, the Flatpak and snap management by default. I just didn't like it.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Thomas, have you had a chance to try Manjaro?
Yeah. So I briefly tried Manjaro. I opted for the architect version simply because one of my best friends, who's also a Linux user, is crazy for Manjaro Architect and keeps saying that they think it's the best distro ever. Whether or not it is, that's up to them. But I decided to give it a try so I could form my own opinions about it. And I will say I found it easier to install than Arch, at least.
Yeah.
But that's to be expected, of course, since it actually has an installation tool.
Yeah, and curses, but yeah, it's definitely, yeah.
It's better than nothing, at least.
Right.
So I gave it XFCE, I think, as the desktop environment.
Mm-hmm.
And beyond that, I haven't really got to try it out very much because I have been busy this week fighting with Windows.
I see priorities.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I had to update my BIOS.
Yeah.
Thomas, you said that was the architect installer?
Yes.
So when you install XFCE, that does that give you the same as the Manjaro ISO? Does the flagship version?
I think so.
Yeah, because that's their flagship. I'm just wondering if it pulls in all the all
the extras and the customizations and all that stuff.
Yeah, it looks like it was configured like their flagship because this is definitely not stock XFCE.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely been configured.
Okay.
So it probably pulls in some other packages in there somewhere.
Cool. Well, that's kind of neat then. Good to know. Eric, you have a chance to try Manjaro this week?
I have not tried 18.2. I've used Manjaro in the past quite a bit, and I just really wanted to see what the differences were. I installed it in a virtual machine, but I haven't really, used it. So
right.
Hold off.
Okay. Fair enough.
Dave.
All right.
Go ahead, Dave.
I was a masochist. Like Thomas, I grabbed the architect version, and it wouldn't boot up for me in a virtual machine, so I threw it on hardware, and it's running fine. Thanks to Rocco for reminding me. I just installed SoftMaker Office on it. Because I always buy the Pro version because I like it. But I enjoyed the tweaking and the ease. It's I don't know. It installed very easily. I like the stuff that they have for default. I put i3 on it. I prefer Awesome, but I figured it being a challenge, I would stretch myself and go with i3 instead. I actually do like their config file. It's nice and concise.
I love their i3 version, dude.
It is nice. I tweaked a couple things in it that I prefer, but it runs smooth. I changed some of the key bindings, and then I basically took a sledgehammer to it, and my setup script is designed for regular Arch, not Manjaro, and it dumps a 18, I think, additional repos into the Pacman config file, and then downloads all the keys and slams in about 200 additional apps and files that need to be installed. And it hiccuped on, I think, 2 of them. Other than that, it took it up. All my normal software is up and running. Like I said, I just finished installing SoftMaker right out of the AUR. Runs fine. So I give it a ton of props. It did not even hiccup when I hit it with a sledgehammer, and it's running nice and smooth, nice and quick, nice and fast. And I like that they have nitrogen installed out of the box to be able to swap out the wallpapers, even though I always link it into mine. But so I got to give them real props. I will probably, I'll play with it over the coming week and probably add a comment or 2 next week. But at this point, it's rock solid and I'm happy.
All right. Excellent. Colin, did you get a chance to test out at Manjaro?
I installed Manjaro Gnome, and that's about as far as I got so far. So I haven't yet to set up the desktop. It is quite a nice looking distro out of the box, but I'll probably leave my thoughts until next week.
Fair enough. All right. Chris, did you get a chance to take a look?
Okay. My computer's being bogged down by something. I don't know what it is. It took a moment to get through the mute button. But yeah, I installed it, and I just have preliminary stuff. I didn't really go in depth. I went with the FreeOffice only because I've always gone with Libre, and I just wanted to see what the differences were. Didn't really play around with it as much as I should have. The only thing that I had a problem with, and I think this was just more of a fluke than anything, was that time was way off. And I know that my hardware clock was set to the correct time when I started. Was in the right time zone and everything else, but yet it was about 5 hours behind where it should have been. Not a big deal. Reset the time, turn the time sync on, and everything was fine. So I think it was probably just a fluke. But other than that, I really haven't had much problems with this, and play with it some more during the week, I guess.
All right, Barbara.
Okay, I have it downloaded. I haven't done anything with it because I was fighting with leaf mold all week, which sounds strange. It just triggered my asthma something wicked, so all I did was cough and wheeze and whatever. And I'm starting to feel a little better, but other than that, so I just didn't get a chance to do it.
It's all good, Barb.
I've got it downloaded.
It's all good. Which one are you trying, Barb?
I downloaded it last week, and now I don't remember.
You're not trying the Mate version?
Probably. I downloaded.
Okay.
Let me see. That's usually what I download.
All right. Well, either way, you're going to try it, right?
Yes, I am going to try it.
Okay.
Even if it's nothing more than doing it on a from the USB, I will try it.
Very nice. Dan.
I'll make this kind of short because I experienced most of the other things the other people did. I did download the GNOME version and the XFC version. I have both of them in a virtual machine, and I've been kind of playing with both of them to decide which one I want to put on hardware and actually use for a while. As far as the snap packs and the flat packs goes, I executed all that stuff directly from the terminal. And when I went to put a snap pack in, it actually went through setup snap core process. And it downloaded the stuff for that. Then it said set up snap core. It installed that. Then it got a snap package and it put that in. Flat packs are almost immediate. It goes to Flat Hub, finds one, poof, you got it. If you want to wait for it. It's kind of slower than snaps. But I'm gonna put it on hardware and take it a little farther. I think I'm gonna go with the Gnome because I hate Gnome. I'm gonna try and give Gnome a better chance than I've been giving it, so I don't have to say I don't like it so much. It deserves some love.
Or at
PZ,
least
you're
it's
muted.
changed.
You're muted, PZ.
Well, let's start that again. Sounds good to me, Dan, giving Gnome some love.
What can I
And-
say?
Yeah, that's cool. So, Shikin, you're up.
Yes. So I gave Manjaro a try. I installed via Architect because I love Architect, and just like Thomas's friend, it's the best thing ever. You know. So well, the great thing about Architect is that you don't need particularly current install media just because it doesn't rely on a graphical interface, and it updates the packages like before it starts installing things. The issue with a lot of rolling releases that tend not to update their install ISOs is that either you can't boot into it in the first place, or when you update your system, everything breaks. So it's nice that Manjaro stays on top of creating current media, but if you don't want to use their big ISOs, you've got this tiny, like 400 megabyte ISO, something like that. So yeah, it came in handy. I ended up setting up the KDE version. Let's get the acronyms right. KDE Plasma version. And I mean, I like the theming of it. I think they do a really good job with their consistency across all of their flavors. KDE was functional in this regard. I didn't have any major glitches, hiccups that sometimes I see when people implement KDE in weird ways. The only thing that I didn't have fun with was MTP and connecting like my phone over USB, but that's kind of like a global KDE issue, so I don't think it was Manjaro's fault. File sharing worked perfectly. Network shares, that was all working. Bluetooth was working fine, but I did notice that some packages, like meta packages, were really weird. So if I fiddled with certain Bluetooth things, it would actually just rip out like the entire power settings for KDE. So I just didn't touch that, and other than that, it worked well. You know, boots up fast. It does. Oh, I use system deboot as well, so no grub for me.
Nice.
Yeah, another benefit of the Architect ISO. So yeah, no, I think it's a great distro, and I think it makes good use of the Arch base.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Alan, I know you might have been busy with a minor beta that rolled out, but did you get a chance to use Manjaro?
No, I have a VM that has it on, but I haven't, and I updated it yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to play with it, and I haven't done a clean install for a little while, so I probably need to do a clean install, which I'll do this week.
Mm-hmm. And so you'll be on Biddle Europe next week, hopefully?
I think so, yeah.
Cool. Good.
All right. Vince, sir, how are you?
Hi. Yeah, good, thanks. So I decided to stretch myself a little bit and try Manjaro KDE because I haven't really spent much time at all before in KDE. And then I also decided to choose FreeOffice in the setup options as for the same reason. But I didn't want to really talk too much about KDE because I want to try and focus on Manjaro. But what I want to say about KDE is that I think KDE, it's a bit like discovering alcohol for the first time. before you try it, hear me out. Before you try it, you hear everyone talking about it and how great it is. You know, and as a teenager, because our drinking age here is 18. You know, the first few times you try it, it gives you all these headaches because you're so not used to all the settings. But then after a while, you really start to realize how versatile it is. And one of the things that I discovered yesterday was that you can actually just simply type on the desktop and it searches everything. I think that is absolutely fantastic.
Yep. That's K-Runner.
Yeah, I know. It's so great. You don't have to press any button. Just start typing.
Mm-hmm.
So now you're getting drunk on power.
Oh, yes. There are some annoyances though. Like I'm a tiling window manager user, so I use i3, and so I was trying to set keyboard shortcuts, but then I discovered that there are like 4 separate places to put keyboard shortcuts. I'm like, oh gosh.
So I actually played with that today, so if you want to, I can show you. And I hadn't played with it before. Nate actually inspired me to look at it, and it's pretty slick. But it's not set up by default. You have to go and do it yourself. So.
That's right. But otherwise, KDE, it looks beautiful on Manjaro. And I think if I wasn't using i3, I'd probably be using KDE. Just onto FreeOffice, because I wanted to try that out a little bit, because I was been using LibreOffice for a long time now. When you first start it up, it gives you the options of choosing whether you want to use the ribbon layout or a traditional layout. I think that's a really cool option to have. Despite the fact that obviously the ribbon layouts are takes blatant design cues from Microsoft. It's not quite as fully featured as LibreOffice. There's no drawing or database components, but I'm not quite sure if that's in the paid option or not. I suspect it probably is. One of the other things I liked was the little Manjaro notifier in the task tray. I figured you can actually click on it and you can actually choose the kernels that you like and switching languages, which I think is really great. I've also decided to become more of a masochist and install via the architect. I've already done that the other day. I installed Manjaro again, but Manjaro Budgie this time, and I found the architect pretty straightforward to use. There are a lot of options. I think Zeb mentioned it the other week. But if you just follow it through step by step, it seems to take it through you. And I got Budgie installed as well, so that's pretty good. Overall, Manjaro is great. Love it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the KDE thing, because I will get into what I had my experience with it in a little bit. But when I tried KDE, I mean, I used to love everything about KDE, and as a few years go by, there's some things that kind of irritate you that don't work right. The little paper cuts here and there, and to be honest with you, I installed the Manjaro KDE version, and I had all of that paper cuts rushing back into my head that I was like, no, I'm not doing this. And I shut it down and I downloaded the Gnome version.
I mean, KDE, it's definitely an acquired taste, but once you get used to it, I can see how absolutely versatile it can be.
Well, I was a KDE guy. I mean, I always was, but I'm slowly losing that for some reason. But anyway,
I can see how having all those options can be intoxicating for sure.
It was overwhelming for me.
Well, I like all of the options.
I
don't like all of the little minor things that don't go right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like they say, with great power comes great responsibility, right?
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's essentially just the mathematical, exponential growth of potential issues, the more things that get crammed in there.
That's why once I set things in Plasma, I leave it alone.
But I will say that as they continue forward, I do not get the random crashes and bugs and lockups and things that I used to get frequently and just ignore and deal with because I still like Plasma enough to use it. So from that regard, it has ingratiated itself all the much more because it really has been very stable. And again, this is Kubuntu with backports, and Rick Mills and the Kubuntu team, they do a phenomenal job keeping up with that stuff. So for what it's worth, I can't get away from it. I'll try something else and I'll use it. I've been doing testing on 1910, and not to get off the subject here, but I mean, it's like every time I use something else, I'm like, man, I wish it just, oh, that's right. I'm just going to boot back into Kubuntu and get on.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's a lot of development going on, and a lot of polish is getting applied with that. So it's really good to see.
I think the problem is that all these Linux desktops have gotten to a point where they're so good, it's really hard to choose one.
It is, Tyler.
So-
That's exactly true.
I kind of agree with that as well.
Yep. So anyway, getting back on track. here.
Anyway.
Yeah. So my bad. I think I missed the prompt. So go ahead, Dan.
Okay. Big Pod. Do you have a chance?
I didn't have a chance to try Manjaro, but I did use it heavily in the past, so I will definitely try it next week. So
All sounds good.
I'll have my stuff next week.
Okay, sounds good. Dark One. I know you have. I know you're a Manjaro user.
I am a Manjaro user indeed, Dan. My production machine actually runs Manjaro mostly because of the AMD stuff. Certain other distros, unfortunately, do not backport or put out updates to Mesa and kernels fast enough. So I'm a KDE guy, so that's what I use. Funny enough, though, it's actually set up more like Unity. Because I used Unity for so long that frame of reference is just what I'm used to now. So everything's up to the left, and that's just how off, and I'm good to go. I used, when I installed this, I used the Architect version. So for me, it's like Chicken said, Architect is actually probably the easiest way to act, like from a command line point of view, the easiest way to install an Arch-based distro that I've used. Oh, you can talk about the scripts and shake your head all you want, Zeb. I already knew we were going to go with that. But it gives you some of like the most options and that kind of stuff, to me anyway. So it works for me. I'll put it that way. I wanted to try FreeOffice, so I installed that. It's not as fully featured or fully baked as I believe somebody else said. Totally true. But I also leave LibreOffice installed. I had that installed. I ripped it out to see how well Manjaro would play with that. And then I installed WPS Office, which is my default for me to go and use. And basically everything I threw at Manjaro, it worked fine. I've installed stuff from the AUR. I installed Cinelira GG for no apparent reason. Worked perfectly fine. Like Oddball software, was it Cawbird or the new Corebird revamp? Install that from the AUR. Worked fine. Manjaro has been flexible. Rocco, to your point, yeah, Katie still got some. still hits you in the face with the paper cuts.
It does,
but I think it's one of those things where it's like if you get through them, you'll heal.
Yeah,
it's just getting through them. That's the painful part.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that Manjaro's KDE version is really nice. I mean, the theme is nice. The way it's set up by default is perfect. It's just, and it had nothing to do with Manjaro.
It's just Plasma.
It's just, yeah, just Plasma was really driving me insane. So it's like,
oh no, I hear you. Plasma. I appreciate the work that they, the Manjaro guys do with their Plasma spin. It's kind of like their baby that they give to the world. So, it's a great thing. I have nothing but good things to say about Manjaro. I understand that for some people it can break. But then again, I've had Debian and Ubuntu and Fedora and 9,000 other different distros that are unbreak. So, mileage may vary.
Excellent. Just a quick thing I want to. I always feel like I'm missing out on these conversations when people talk about they had problems with paper cuts because they noticed this and they noticed that, and this doesn't work and that doesn't work. And I'm sitting there thinking, what are you talking about? It just works.
Thank you.
Well, okay. Well, it's like in Rocco's case, it's usually like the anti-aliasing on the fonts aren't right. So it's
just not right, dude.
It's small stuff like that where it's just
pixels out of place.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so, excuse me, guys, but anti-aliasing on fonts? What a font is a font is a font. What? I don't get it. Sorry.
The fonts won't look as crisp. Is basically what he's saying. There's a blurriness to the fonts. I'm saying
the rendering of them is not properly done.
Yeah, correct.
In compare when you're coming from another,
when you're coming from Gnome,
or elementary.
And you're trying Plasma, the fonts just don't look right. They just don't.
I'm just glad I wear glasses.
I wear contacts, dude.
I was going to say, Zeb, I'm wearing glasses, so what's my excuse? Even I notice it.
Is this before you configure it, or is this just by default?
By default.
By default.
By default.
Even trying to configure it, it seems like the more I mess with it to try to configure it, the worse it gets. So I don't know. It may have something to do with NVIDIA too. That I don't know either. So
you tinker too much, it'll become unstable.
But so that's usually what Rocco means by like paper cuts. So Zeb is like it's going to be more personal stuff that you'll see, that as opposed to like glaring issues of like this didn't work or that didn't work, but it's like small like nuanced things where it's like, oh hey, look, that gradient's off, or that in Rocco's case that's a pixel off, or it's that kind of stuff.
I guess I must have rhino skin then, because I don't get.
Yeah, I let that stuff go right through me. I use the software more than I use the desktop.
You know what? All of you have a problem, and that is you need to use Windows more often, and then you wouldn't have this as an issue. I'm serious.
All I gotta do is hear about Windows.
He's right.
He's
Wait, right.
What? Just don't.
I mean,
use Windows.
basically,
I had to deal with it this week. Don't use it. It's painful.
If you, I don't mean it disparagingly, but like when it's a lot more harsh. I mean, if maybe Plasma doesn't have maybe the best looking pixel or anti-aliasing on the fonts. I mean, I don't know. I don't see that. But if I go from Windows, that actually is painful in comparison. So, I mean, obviously you guys have really high standards. I know Chicken does.
Well, we should get back to Manjaro, and we can bring this up in the second hour, and that's perfectly fine because it has a lot to do with the high DPI screens and stuff like that. So,
but Manjaro plus for me always.
Awesome. Ryan, or I'm sorry, Adam. Adam, I know you looked at Manjaro a little bit this week. Did you want to talk about it, or no? Up to you.
So I've used it. I used 18.1, not this week, but before. I used the Plasma one. I did try the XFCE one, but no. So the Plasma one was actually pretty good. Actually, most of my game streams that I have on my YouTube channel were on Plasma Manjaro. I found the performance on there to actually be pretty good. Especially when doing display capture and window capture for the games and stuff. Plasma just seems to be so lightweight these days in terms of rendering overhead that I don't have that problem now. Gnome 3.34 has solved that problem on Gnome, so that's all good. I don't know if 18.1 has 3.34 yet or not, but last time I checked it was 32, so whatever. Yeah, I like Manjaro, the ability to install like AUR helpers really easily without having to go scour, the internet for them. Their theme is pretty good. The FreeOffice thing, I don't know. FreeOffice kind of felt clunky. Like it just felt like out of place almost. Like even more out of place than like an Electron app would look like, right? Like it didn't feel right. I didn't really use it very much because I don't have much of a use for an Office suite. But I thought it was kind of neat that they're branching out into that. Yeah, I think Manjaro's pretty good distro, pretty well put together. The installer could probably use a little bit of work because I've had a few times where the installer has gone kind of south on me. But other than that, yeah, it's pretty good.
I have something to bring up that I'm not trying to be inflammatory, but I've heard this discussed in the past where Manjaro makes the claim that it's easy to use for beginners.
No.
And I'm curious to see what
Definitely not
people in general.
Beginners to Arch, I think they mean.
Yeah, then yeah.
Yeah, I don't necessarily
probably
think their
clarify
target audience is people coming over from Windows.
But
If you
actually,
read the
they
website,
kind of are, yeah, because there's a lot of gamer people that are coming over that want to come over to Linux to play games, and they're seeing channels like Linus Tech Tips and stuff recommending Manjaro specifically, and so they're coming over. They're all they are Windows people. They may not be like the most basic of users because they might have some technical ability, but they really are targeting those people. But I don't think it's a good option for them.
And again, I'm not trying to detract from what they've done, because I think for all of us who are familiar with Linux, it's certainly an easy experience. Certainly easier than, just doing it the Arch way. But I guess when I went to their website this week, I did have that again. I read it, for the first time in a few months, and I just thought I'd be careful with that whole beginner-friendly thing.
I think it really depends on what desktop environment you use. Because if you use XFCE or Cinnamon or Budgie, those are going to be pretty full-fledged, and everything is laid out right in front of you. And
But how are they going to know that? How are they going to know what GNOME or
XFCE
KDE
acts
or
a
any of
lot
that
like
is, right?
Windows does.
But if you have like 6 different choices, how are they going to know which one to pick?
Well, because 9 times out of 10 they steer you towards the XFCE one, so
Right.
you'll probably download that.
Well, the two official ones they're going to push towards are the XFCE or the KDE ones. If you go to their download page, and then yes, you can drill in. Zeb, my point is basically that they have had some. Admittedly, I have a problem, I think, with rolling releases for new users, period. Not just Arch, OpenSUSE, any rolling release, I think, is a little, it's fast. There's things happening, things are updating all the time, things are breaking. If you're a new user...
Hang on, whoa, things are breaking. I haven't had a breakage on Manjaro for 2 years.
Things are changing. Things are changing. I will retract the breaking.
Well, I will say that for new users, I definitely would not recommend an Arch-based distro for any new user that's not had an experience with Linux. Yes, Linus Tech Tips, they're talking about Manjaro as far as a gaming, the best gaming distro or whatever they might be saying, but I still would not steer them towards an Arch-based distro, just because you also have to maintain that. It's not just about downloading it and using it. You also have to be able to maintain it. And if you can't, then that's definitely not a good choice for beginners.
You're giving them the AUR, which they don't understand what that is. They
you're not.
You're not. Not the basic
install.
By
default.
No, now we're giving them flat packs and snaps.
Okay. Well, I'm telling you I'm saying new user. I'm not saying,
I think
you're talking about stability. Manjaro tests.
I'm not talking
everything.
about stability, Dave.
Then what are you talking about? Maintaining. That's all has to do with stability.
I'm talking about the amount of change that happens on a regular basis. And when you go to update and you see hundreds of packages potentially, or even worse, you're not updating, and then there's a potential there.
You click the little icon, you don't even see all the hundreds. It just does it automatically in the background.
Okay.
I think what people are doing, and I've been guilty of doing this in the past, is going, oh my God, Arch, it's a nightmare. Manjaro makes it easy. As a new, you just click the little icon, you go update now. And if anybody's talking about a rolling release, I'm sorry, but isn't Windows a rolling release now?
No, it's not.
No.
The rolling nightmare.
Why not? Because you get updates every 3 to 6 months.
Now, Eric, any Arch distro other than Manjaro, I would not push people towards. But Manjaro, like OpenSUSE, test the stuff before they ever put it into the repos for you to update.
I hope they don't test it like OpenSUSE.
Yeah, because Manjaro is actually like tested by people practically, not just push through a machine and expect it to work in normal circumstances.
I'm really not trying to start any kind of tension here. I'm just saying, literally, if someone were to say to me, should I use Manjaro? I'd say, well, have you used Linux before? No, not really. I'm going to say no. It's just
I have to agree.
I just am.
I have to agree. And not because Manjaro is not a great distro. Not because Manjaro doesn't make Arch easy. I think and I said this before, I think as Linux users for a long time, all of us here have used Linux for a long time. I think we forget what it's like to be a new user coming over for Windows. They don't know nothing. They don't know anything of how Linux operates. So, I mean, okay. So let me track back a little bit. There will be some users who are technical, who are power users on Windows that will be able to handle it, and then that would be okay for them to use Manjaro because they are very technical and they know a lot about maintaining a system. They know a lot about changing customizations around and updating. That's fine to recommend somebody like that for Manjaro, but a brand new user to Linux that's never used Linux before, who is not technical, I don't think I would recommend Manjaro.
And I would challenge you, Rocco, to take two different distros, Ubuntu and Manjaro XFCE, and set them both up and tell me what all these extra steps you would have to do on Manjaro that you don't have to do on Ubuntu.
I wouldn't recommend Ubuntu either. I would recommend either Linux Mint, Ubuntu Mate, something like that, that somebody coming over, it's all set up for them. Everything.
But don't you have to click a button to update both of those operating systems?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The same as you do.
I think at the end
It's
of
not
the
just
day,
about updates. It's about the whole system in general being set up for the person.
at the end of the day,
Manjaro isn't.
At the end of the day, you're gonna have different opinions, regardless of where you land on this.
Yep.
There's no way, you're gonna have some that are for Manjaro and other rolling distros, Solus, and take your pick. Tumbleweed and X, Y, and Z that are gonna say, "Oh, I never had a break." Other people, not so much. It depends on you have to look at the technicality of the user.
Yep.
I'm sorry I'm not going to give grandma Octopi and throw that in front of their face and say, figure it out. Because grandma's going to want something that looks like Deepin as far as pretty icon. I click, it goes to there. You have to look at the user. If they're more technically inclined, they'll know when it says, oh, hey, look, this is from Git. What that means.
I personally would say that if someone's asking me, I would, whatever LTS release makes sense, desktop aside, doesn't matter. I think that's probably what makes most sense to me, because I'm probably going to be the one helping them set it up. And once you have an LTS set up, it's almost set in stone. I mean, there could be security updates, but very little else. And that's really what I mean in terms of a rolling release. I'm not saying it's going to break. I'm not saying it's necessarily unstable, but it's up to them. My wife won't do Windows updates for 2 or 3 months at a time because she just ignores it. And that's exactly what users do. They just click off and they ignore. So I wasn't trying to make a point other than to say that I think the way that they portray it as being like, easy peasy. I, as a more advanced user, have had issues with Manjaro break on me. And if I didn't know how to deal with the terminal and the command line, I mean, I've had it happen several times where it just wouldn't boot, and I had to go in and chroot and, fix grub or something like that. And, I wasn't doing anything extreme or different. So,
well, about a year ago this time, I was a pretty new user, and I did go from Ubuntu or something. I went from Mint to Manjaro and tried it out, and it broke 4 times on me. I could not get anybody really to give me any useful help on how to fix it. I'd get updates and then restart the machine, and I'd have messages like light DM is missing, or grub is corrupted, or kernel panic. And I'd try and get some help for this, and people just say reinstall it. I'm like, after the 4th time to move on. I didn't really learn nothing out of it.
And a lot of that is because we're desensitized, especially people who are enthusiasts, like distro hoppers and people like myself who used to do it all the time. Reinstalling is second nature, right? It's so easy to do. Linux, if something goes wrong, you just reinstall. And then we start saying that to other people. And that's not what anyone wants to do. No one wants to actually reinstall.
Yeah, but when you power up, Chicken, when you power up your computer and you need to use it and it won't start, that is the most irritating thing at that moment.
Right. But the reinstallation thing is a common trope in lots of platforms. It's not just unique to Linux, but
that's true.
Part of the problem is the user has a free operating system. They often haven't got any kind of technical support contract of any kind. It's not like a corporate user who can dial 555 help desk and get through to a human being who can walk them through with lots of excellent documentation and internal knowledge base about how to solve the problem. Even if they do have that at a corporate environment, often they will still end up with, okay, well, we've tried everything. We're going to re-image your machine. Like, that's no different than reinstalling, right? And so people who are using Linux and are reliant on people who are volunteering their time
those people who are volunteering their time don't have 3 hours to debug why this grub thing failed or why this video driver didn't work. They haven't got time for it, and they're not motivated to do it because nobody's paying them to do it. And so it falls to the bottom of the stack, which is, well, just reinstall. That'll probably fix it.
I just don't think it's good to do.
Oh, I agree. I completely agree. It's no different. I refuse. If someone says to me, "I'll just reboot, that'll probably fix it," I will refuse because I want to know what the problem is, why it's happening, what the actual solution is. Up until the point where I have to do some work or have got to be in a meeting, and the only solution is to turn the thing off and on again, right? And that's the state that, as Dan was saying, a user who wants to do work gets to the state where they've got a black screen and there's nothing else they can do. The only out for them is to reinstall because they don't have the technical knowledge and they don't have someone on hand who's being paid to help them.
And reinstall PEP.
What I'm curious to see is from here, with this change that Manjaro has made. And again, this is nothing to take away from Manjaro because I use Manjaro quite a bit for many years. And it is a well put together system. And the developers of the distribution are active in the forums in terms of supporting users and things like that. You will get a reply from those guys. So it's not like they're just throwing people to the wind. I guess it is that perception. And so what I'm curious is, where do they go from here in terms of them being a company? Are they going to offer paid support? What is it? If they're a company, presuming they're going to have to try to make profit of some type and have a business. So I don't know if that means they're going to have end user, desktop, corporate focused. I'm just really not sure. I haven't seen the idea of a rolling arch base as being a platform that you are selling support for. Has anyone aware that there's been another distribution that's undertaken that?
Not based on Arch, no.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting proposition, and I'm curious to see where they go.
And I do actually agree with you on the updates part, because when it comes to somebody who maybe updates every 3 to 6 months, just LTSs are a lot easier on the system with those updates than rolling releases are. So in that instance, I very much agree with you. The ease of use, I'll argue till the cows come home, but for the users that don't update, constantly put it off instead of just clicking the little symbol, once a week. For the people that just refuse to do that, I agree. It's rolling releases are going to cause many more headaches than the LTSs.
And I know some people, the whole anecdote of people don't update their system, and then the flip side of that is, well, there's just an icon there to click on and it's easy to do it. Hate to break it to you, people don't do that. Normal people do not click that icon, and we know this. We have data that shows this. We have bugs that have existed that we have fixed, and the little pop-up box, the error tracker thing in Ubuntu that says your thing has crashed, please send a thing, and that can happen in the background, right? We've got bugs that we can see people are still experiencing that we fixed 2 years ago. And the reason they're still experiencing them is because they don't update their system. As soon as we turned on automatic updates, suddenly those people get fixes and the bug fixes land on their machines and they have no idea. They didn't even know that they were experiencing this problem because something was just crashing in the background and the system recovers. But we knew it was happening because the error tracker shows us these crash reports. So we know users don't do updates. So I don't buy the argument that just put an icon in the corner of the screen, people will click it and update the system, because they flat out won't.
So I agree with Alan here. At work, we have deadlines for users to update their systems or their system gets isolated from the network. Despite those warnings, despite a big install now button, every week I have users coming to me because their system got isolated and I have to install the updates for them and put their machine back into compliance.
Wow.
Yep.
That's impressive. That's
I have, Alan, I have friends who are like that when it comes to not updating. They went from Mac. I mean, they went from Windows to Mac. I would never put them on Unix, on Linux at all. Linux. Oh my God, no. And I mean, they say, "Oh, I got a thing that says I haven't updated," and it's like, well, just click on it. It's okay. I have one friend who won't do an update until she knows that I've done that update and it's safe. So, I mean, that's the typical. I'm going to say it. That's the typical user. I mean, you've got them with Ubuntu, and I've seen them with my Mac friends who used to be Windows friends, but we're still all friends.
So the obvious answer to this then is to go the route that Ubuntu have done and turn on auto updates, but with a big warning for those users who don't like auto updates. Would you like to use auto updates, yes or no? Or just say auto updates are going to be enabled unless you go and switch them off. And your average Linux user, or not your average, your us will know how to go and turn those off. And then that would solve the problem of updates.
Either that or the Fedora Silverblue, where the core system is just not touchable and updates itself and keeps itself solid, and you just play in user space above it.
Even I wouldn't go anywhere near.
Well, let's get back to Manjaro for the moment, because we're kind of like trailing off into outer space here. I did try it. I downloaded the awesome window manager version first, and I installed that. And I hate to say it, but I was completely lost. So I had no idea what I was doing with it. There was no shortcut thingy for the desktop showing you what the shortcuts were. So I said, okay, I'm going to try i3. Downloaded i3, and that version of Manjaro is absolutely awesome. There are so many cool things about the Manjaro i3 version. And one of them is for your timeout on your screen, the screen actually just blurs everything. And it's so cool looking. I know that's like top level stuff, but I care about that kind of stuff. So to get back into your system, you have to enter a password, but there's no login box or anything. You just start typing, and there's a big green circle in the middle as you're typing your password. And if you get it wrong, it flashes red. It doesn't allow you in. It's just a really cool touch. But it lets you back in, and I had a lot of fun playing with it. But I really got stuck because I had it on this machine. I'm like, I really love this. I need to put it on this machine because I really do want to use i3. So what I did was I took a spare hard drive, put it in this machine, partitioned 2 partitions on it, and installed Manjaro i3 on this machine. And that's when I ran into problems not with Manjaro specifically, but with i3 and high DPI. And I have no idea what I'm doing with that kind of stuff. So I need somebody to give me an i3 intervention to help me out with the configs so that I can get it up and running.
You're up.
The only problem, I don't have any high DPI monitors, so I could try and research it for you, and I'll get back to you. But I'm not quite sure if I'll get it to work.
You could always try poking Ryan.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to, but like I said, I just stopped playing with it because it was so everything was so small, and I was trying to add things to the configs, and I did that. I was able to add certain things to it and make it work, but the high DPI thing really just killed my
Distro tube.
So then I installed the KDE version on the second part of it, and that's when I ran into some of them paper cuts. And then I downloaded the Gnome version, put it on a USB, and that had a block error on the USB, so I didn't get to install that in time. But I'm looking forward to trying the Gnome version this week. So there you have that. Tony, did you try Manjaro? Hold on, brother. You are muted. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I did try it.
So what do you think of it?
Actually, I liked it. I did try the GNOME version, and because I've been looking for, I'm using a Ubuntu right now, but I've been thinking about switching. I thought I'd go back to GNOME and try that one for a little bit. And for the last week or so, I've actually liked it. so far it does everything I need it to do. During the install process, it went smoothly. And when I got to the point where it was asking about the Office, I went ahead and selected the FreeOffice because I wanted to see what everything was about. And it's actually not that bad. It actually works for me, and it looks like Windows, Office 2016. So it fulfilled all my needs for right now. I ran into a small problem where I wasn't able to access the files on my NAS, but I was able to figure that out, and everything else just worked for me.
Nice. Very nice. Well, anybody want to add anything before we cut it off?
I did want to add one thing about the FreeOffice. The free version is hobbled. It is definitely hobbled. I've used the paid version for 5 years now, and the paid version is pretty much the equivalent of Office 365. I would be hard pressed to find real differences, but if you stick with the free version, yeah, you are going to notice multiple things that you should be able to do that you can't.
Is there any major ones that stick out to you, Dave?
I never used the free version, so I'm not sure. But I've talked to enough people, and they say, "But I tried to do this," and I'm like, "But I do that all the time."
Okay.
So it's things that have been mentioned are like converting files, saving to different formats, some of the formatting options that are more than just indenting your paragraphs are missing, but it's just a very much a hobbled version that you get for free.
Awesome.
I'm
Awesome
gonna say
info.
that- Yeah, no, I agree with Dave on that because I tried the free version and then ended up getting the the paid version, and it's amazing how much more is available to how many more functions are available.
And is it expensive?
Not really. What was it like? So, if I'm not mistaken, it was something like for a subscription, it was something like $29 a year. Was I wrong? I mean, it was really pretty inexpensive. Something like that.
Let me ask you guys a question. How many of you guys raise your hands if you did install the free software version?
I can't raise my hand, but I did.
Okay, so what are the different reasons you guys chose? I chose it because of all the hassle the Manjaro guys got for putting it in there. I just chose it just because of that. But what are the reasons you guys chose to try it out?
I wanted to see something other than LibreOffice and see what the difference was.
I'm with Dan. I mean, the exact reason I was like, hey, wow, there's something other than OpenOffice that's an alternative to Libre. I'll try it out.
They the feedback that they got about not having enough, I forget what it was, you couldn't save it in a certain format. There was something that people really criticized in the free version.
Right.
So they had made that change, and I wanted to see how that looked.
Well, I think this is like the perfect example of a distro making a decision and the community responding to it, regardless if you think they responded bad or good or were indifferent. And then the distro working with the community and coming to a resolution that I think there shouldn't be too many people that have a problem with a choice in the installer of whether you want LibreOffice or FreeOffice. So I think that's a perfect example of a distro listening to their community and making the right decision.
Yeah, I want to take the chance here and actually point out that Manjaro, they're really good open source community stewards in the sense that actually touch on something that Adam said about how their installer has issues from time to time, but they are actively developing in that, and they contribute back upstream often there. So a lot of the changes that are taking place there are things that they're pushing through. So that's really good to see. So they're fixing their own issues, but they're also helping everybody else that's using that too.
Well, I thought their Calamaris installer worked pretty well, actually.
Yeah.
Didn't seem to be any problems with their Calamaris installer.
Yeah, they work hard at it. Yeah, I will say you see bug reports from them, and they contribute code too regularly. So it's nice.
I wanted to point out that in case anyone's using Architect, you're not going to see that choice to install Office from Architect. So I'd initially done Architect with Plasma and was slightly confused that choice wasn't there. But of course, it makes sense that it would be part of Calamaris and not part of Architect.
Yep. Well,
you do have the option of installing extra packages though during the install, in which you can choose those. So you won't be totally cut off. It's just it doesn't actually ask you for it, so it's buried in there somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, the whole package chooser thing that's in Calamaris actually came about because that was a feature that didn't exist. So that's really nice to see.
It also gives you the choice of none if you don't want one.
Right.
And also, so I had done some work on swap this week, and someone had informed me that the installer actually gives you a choice of different swap types, which was pretty cool.
Yep.
None or regular or hibernate, and it'll adjust based on that, which is that's a nice choice to have.
It is, and so it does a partition based on size. If you go with suspend or hibernate, depending on which one you want to do, it'll do a different size. So the smaller one defaults to 2 gig, I think, and then the larger one is obviously enough to hibernate. So pretty great.
Well, I think the one thing that I noticed that I didn't before was I prefer a welcome screen that like walks you through the steps. This welcome screen doesn't walk you through steps, but it has everything you would need in it, and it has a box for applications, and it actually brings up basically another installer where you can multiple click the different programs that you want on the machine. Just go down and check all of the boxes that you want to install, and it installs them right away for you. So I thought that was a nice touch. Dan,
go ahead.
Yeah, well, we're talking about the suspend and hibernate and swap. Okay. I noticed in Manjaro, I could not find where the power button is a suspend function. Is that due because I didn't set up a proper swap file?
Which edition are you using?
Both GNOME and XFCE. I just walked through the installer without making hardly any changes.
It probably defaults to none. If I had to guess.
That's probably what I'm not seeing.
You were doing it in VirtualBox though, Dan, right?
Right.
So it may not see the hardware as having a suspend capability. I'm not sure. I'm just guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, I just don't have the suspend or hibernate anywhere. I got shut down, cancel, and something
Probably
else.
because it is in VM. Because why would you suspend a VM?
Yeah, that's my guess.
Yeah, you just shut it down or turn it off. Yeah. What would be interesting though with that Calamaris installer is if they gave, okay, it's good that they've got different swap partition sizes, but it would be nice to have a little tip box that says swap file instead.
That is something that there is an issue for that. They haven't implemented it yet, though.
It's in Architect because when I set up my i3,
right? Yeah, it you can do it in Architect, but not in Calamaris.
Oh, okay. Because in Architect, you either need to physically set up a separate partition to have a swap partition, or it will automatically ask you if you want a swap file, and if you do, how big you want it.
Right. Yeah, swap file is one of the only things that you can't do there as far as a choice. But that should happen at some point, I would imagine. I mean, there is an issue there for it. So,
all right. Anybody want to say any last words for Manjaro, or are we going to move on?
Just one final little word from me, and that is I had the pleasure of meeting Philip Muller from the Manjaro project a few months ago. He came to one of our Snapcraft summits, and he is one of the loveliest guys in open source. He's a really, truly lovely chap, and myself and Martin Wimpress had many beers in the bar with him, and he's just a super relaxed, chilled out, lovely guy. It's I have all the time in the world for that man. So yeah, that's off to him.
I agree.
I'm genuinely thrilled for them that they've taken this step and they get to do this as their thing. I mean, that's so cool, you know.
I'm generally impressed with the Manjaro that they added snap packs and flat packs to it, so the AUR isn't your last choice if you can't find it in Pac-Man. You can go to Flat Hub and get something, or you can go to the Snap store and get something. I like distros that have many avenues to get your software.
Well, they're pretty conscientious about having their own repos, right? So they're not using just straight Arch. You know, they are using their own testing and stable repos. Some people complain about that because it takes them sometimes a week or two, but almost always, if you go to the forums and look at their posts, it's because they put it out there. Like, so back to the testing thing, you know, people are on testing and they're giving feedback. Hey, are you having any problems? Or you're not having problems? If you are, they will address them before they push things out to stable. So they have a really good system in place for managing. That's why I was saying I'm curious to see, because I know there isn't an Arch-based sort of supported distro, so to speak. And because of their structure and the way that they've already been doing things, I think it's there. They might have to do a little more work around it and formalize it, but they've put a lot of effort into this, you know, over the years, and it really does show.
Yep. When we talked to Philip and Bernhard on Destination Linux, it was an awesome conversation, and I hope to have them guys on here on one of these biddles in the next week, maybe, because that would be awesome to talk to them again.
And here's something for you. That'd be an awesome dual Linux Spotlight.
Well, I think each one deserves their own. So there you go.
Which means it's coming soon. Watch this space.
Speaking of Linux Spotlight, did you guys see that Cubicle Nate guy was on Linux Spotlight this week?
I skipped that one. Yeah, I just
it was real cringy to watch.
Nah, it was an excellent episode.
Yeah, it was
He
good.
had a lot to say.
It was
Yeah.
good.
Yep.
He really loves that tumbleweed too.
Mm-hmm.
Can't help it.
No, there's two distros he loves. There's only two he knows of, because he's set up a proxy that blocks all other distro sites.
There
Even
are
his
three
kids only think there's two versions of Linux.
All right.
And someone actually, okay, well, there's a dead silent for you.
That's what I said. Like,
Wow. Here.
Anyway, if you haven't seen the Linux Spotlight with Nate, you should go check it out, because it was a really, really good episode talking to him, and it was a long episode too, wasn't it?
That's the
Yes, it was. That's why I said Nate had a lot to say.
It didn't seem that long.
No, it flew by.
It was
All
fun.
right.
I enjoyed it a lot.
So, Eric, you had mentioned you were doing some stuff on Swap, and you put out a video on it. So tell me why it's important, or why you feel it's important to always have a swap, even if you don't think you're going to need it.
Well, if you are a dunderhead like me, and you already have two virtual machines running using like 8 to 10 gigs of your memory, and then you're got overhead of all your other stuff open. So Ubuntu by default is giving me 2 gigs of a swap file. And yeah, I was recording a video. I was about an hour in. I'd already had machines open, didn't realize it. I fired up a third one, and all of a sudden everything started to get slow on me. And I thought, oh, that's weird, you know? And then everything just like locked, and I'm like, oh no. And what I did, I was like, well, let's see if it'll recover. And it took about 5 minutes, but it finally did sort of flush itself, and it did respond. It like shell crashed, and like it was not pretty, but I was able to save my work. And then I thought to myself, that's really dumb. What is my swap file? I didn't even think about it, you know, and I looked, and I'm like, 2 gigs. Yeah, I've got 16 gigs of physical memory. Like, I should probably at least have another 8, you know, of a virtual, you know, swap file. So then I went down the path of, well, okay, I've never really looked at like the differences between swap file and swap partitions, and coming from the server side, it was always swap partition. So what's the advantage of swap file? And really, I just went through all of that in the video. I'm not going to rehash it all here, but essentially, I'm not going to use swap as a day-to-day thing. I need it for those instances where I do stupid things like that. And so performance isn't the most important thing to me. It's really the flexibility of being able to either enable it or disable it or grow it or shrink it or whatever. And swap files just are really convenient and work very well. And really, the point of me thinking about it and wanting to put out a video was just, I'm not sure people do anymore, because we all, not all, but a lot of us have machines with 8 or 16 or 32 or even more in some cases gigs of RAM, and you don't think about it until something happens, and then it's like, oh yeah, I guess I probably should have done something about that. So that's really what I wanted people to do, is just kind of look and say, what do I have now? Even if I don't plan on using it, I should probably have something there. And what's the easiest way to do that?
So a quick misconception I had was I thought a swap file grew as it was needed. That's obviously not the case then, if yours suddenly went, oh, hang on a minute, I can't do anything.
Nope, you get what you get.
No,
Go ahead,
that's not true. They can be set to grow.
Can be, but it wasn't.
Okay, right, yeah. So like most guides will set them up to automatically grow, but if they aren't set up that way, it will.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I didn't know that either.
Popey was going to say something.
I've seen more videos on how to shrink them than grow them.
So I haven't had a chance to look at it, and I'm curious, Chicken, what tool you would be using to do that, because from what I've seen, it is pretty much fixed. Now I know there's systemd swap out there, and maybe that's what you're talking about.
So I just have a swap file that I've set up with like Falicate, and whenever which doesn't happen often, but whenever I do like kind of max out my system, I have it set to like 768 megs by default. But if I really push it, it'll start growing. I've seen it go over like 6 gigs. And then once my memory usage goes back down, I can either shrink that size or just keep it.
Some of the old distros had a setting called swappiness hidden somewhere.
That's a different thing. But you have it set to f-allocate? I mean, so you f-allocate the file. You're saying the size of the file itself gets bigger and smaller, but the amount
so
you've
like that
allocated
file itself
stays fixed.
Yeah, the space of the swap file itself actually grows.
That's okay. You I thought you meant like literally it was dynamically growing. Yeah, no. That's so yes, f-allocate's just going to allocate the space, but not fill it unless you need it. So okay,
Yeah.
you threw me off there, Dan. I didn't mean to dismiss you. The swappiness is how aggressive your system is with swap, and you can turn that up and down basically to tell it like if you're getting closer to using up your memory, go ahead and push more. The conclusion I came to as well is basically if you're relying on swap, more than likely you're probably at a point where you just need more RAM, because swap doesn't fix that problem. It's really like Chicken saying, like it's an overrun. If something happens, you should have it there in case.
It's a buffer.
If you see it happening all the time, like that's just a sign to say, like.
So
some of us are running some older.
The exception of that is really with the hibernate functionality. So if like on Windows, for example, with newer laptops, they'll have a function where you close the laptop, it'll go into suspend for a certain amount of time, and then it will suspend a disk by hibernate, and that's to preserve the battery life for the longer time when you're not using the machine. So systemd actually has a facility for that, where it will hibernate your machine after a certain amount of time of suspend. So if you say going on a plane ride, or maybe you're just driving a long drive and your laptop's in the trunk, there's no need to leave it on suspend because it'll just drain the battery over time. So you need the certain amount of swap space for that kind of functionality to work as well.
Yes, and also the fact that some of us have some older equipment that we can't get above 2 gigs of RAM, and I just haven't had the funds to get something where I could put, like 4, 8, 16, 32, 200 gigs of RAM in. and so that's why I need swap space. But at the tell you the truth, most of the time, it only uses maybe 1% of the swap file. That I've allocated 2 gigs for it, and it seems to like having 2 gigs of memory and 2 gigs of swap area.
So to throw something else into the mix, what's the difference between that and ZRAM?
I don't know what ZRAM is.
ZRAM is compressed RAM.
Yeah.
So it's compressing blocks of memory, not writing unused blocks out to disk. It's compressing blocks in memory, so they take up less space. So the chance of you needing to swap is reduced because you're taking up less space. That's, interestingly, on the subject of swap, I think the most contentious Ask Ubuntu question I ever answered was a question where someone said, how much swap should I have? And I wrote a bit about my opinion and experience. And my opinion is never have 0 swap. And anyone who tells you you don't need swap is wrong. And I will argue to the death, and it's a hill I will die on. You do swap, because even if you have 32 gigs of RAM, when your computer gets under, when Linux gets under significant memory pressure, like when you have a few Electron applications open or something, and it's under load, the kernel will go looking for swap and try and swap out. And I don't know what that algorithm is, but it's broken. And if you don't have any swap, it will feel like it's swapping, but it's not. Like you haven't got a swap file, you've got no swap space. It will drag the system down to its knees. And I've seen this many, many times over the years. Usually when, for some reason, I've messed up my FS tab or something and swap no longer mounts, and I didn't realize. I thought I had swap and I don't. And suddenly my laptop grinds to a halt, and I go looking and find the kswapd process is consuming all of the CPU, and it's thrashing like mad, and there is no swap. And if I can get in there in time and enable the swap again, it carries on fine. So you always need some. It doesn't have to be a tremendous amount. Yes, if you want to hibernate, you need a fair amount, but most people don't hibernate. But always have some, never have none.
I agree with that, because I've read that somewhere, not from you, but I had read that somewhere, that if you have none and your computer reaches that point, it will just lock up and die. So even on my desktop that has 64 gigs of RAM, I always, whenever I distro hop, I always put at least 1 gig of swap in, just so it has something to find, even though it'll probably never ever need to go looking.
The other thing is, as well, is that even if you don't reach the maximum capacity of your RAM, it will preemptively use swap. So you're not, it's not useless even if you're not maxing out your RAM. Like, it's getting used for typically less. Either I don't remember if it was things that are lower priority and therefore slower access time is okay, or if it was things that are higher priority and can absolutely not be killed, and that's why they're put in swap. Like, I don't remember which way it was, but either way, it starts shoving things in the bag well before you reach that limit.
So can I say that I don't have swap on my computer?
You can say
as
that.
long as you have enough memory.
I'm just saying, like, I'm not for it or
Alan's
against
gonna
it.
yell at you.
No, I'm not for it or against it. I'm not saying one way or the other. I'm just making a statement that I don't have any.
We got one
I was under the impression that with 32 gigabytes you didn't need it.
It should work much faster on an SSD.
You might not need it. You might not need it, and it might be that you never hit that ceiling. You're never going to go anywhere near the 32 gig limit. But there is a possibility that if you load up a big game and you have a couple of other applications running, that it might chew up all of your RAM. At that point, if you run top, you'll see kswapd, like multiple, one per process, eating your computer alive and your computer completely locking up. And in fact, some people see that happen and they think their distro is just broken, or they think their computer is broken because the system locks up sometimes, right? And they don't know what to attribute it to, and they don't realize it's because they don't have any swap space.
For what it's
Depending
worth,
on what
Rocco,
distro you're using as well, a swap file could automatically be created. I know Ubuntu does that by default, so Pop! OS might also do that.
and for what it's worth, it takes 5 steps to create a swap file, mount it, and add it to your FS tab, and then you'll never have to think about it again.
So what I used to do was after I realized what swap was actually for as far as like memory and being like that safety net, I had like 500 megabytes of swap on my system. And then once I learned that swap was actually used for suspend as well, I started actually like equaling the amount of
hibernate. They're two different things. Not
Or
suspend.
hibernate.
I'm sorry to nitpick, but suspend
No,
is
you're
very
fine. You're right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So once I learned that was used for hibernate, I actually started equaling the amount of memory I had. And I just realized a few weeks ago that when I was reinstalling my OS, maybe like 4 months ago, that somehow my swap does not equal my memory. I have it says in GNOME System Monitor that I have 15.5 gigabytes of memory, but I have 15.3 gigabytes of swap. So I literally, as we were talking, just made a 20 gigabyte swap file and added it to my FS tab, and I'm in the middle of enabling hybrid suspend right now, because that's something that I've actually really wanted, because hybrid suspend is a really nice feature in case you want that extra safety net if you do go to suspend. But you should always have at least a little bit of swap, like 500 megs, not a big deal. Leave it in your root partition as a swap file. Don't ever think about it ever again. And it's not hard to make.
So
I would say
swap
more than
file,
500, but I agree with you. Sorry, go ahead, Nate.
swap file versus swap partition.
So the
I mean,
only
maybe
the
I'm
only thing I found,
maybe I'm Linux wrong, but
Well,
but I have swap partition.
I got challenged on this, so I went and did the research. The only thing I've really found when it comes to that was, well, 2 things. One is, if you are planning ahead and know how much swap you want, then it could be advantageous to have it as a partition for a couple reasons. One is swap performance is based on that file being a contiguous block of the disk and being as low fragment as possible, or no fragmentation. So the potential exists that if you create a swap file on a disk that's been in use for a while and is a smaller disk, that fallocate command isn't going to grab a contiguous chunk of disk. And so if you were using it on a regular basis, you could see a performance difference between a contiguous file versus a swap partition. But that's, I looked for like literally an hour, and that was the best I could come up with, were those 2
You're
reasons.
basically saying that partition would be more like your swap is sandboxed in.
Well, the partition means that the swap gets the whole chunk of your disk, right?
Right.
There's no sharing space with any other file. It is a swap partition, and that's all it does. Versus a swap file, which lives on a disk partition, which shares its space with other files.
The only other major difference would be with a swap file, you can make that as your system is running and dynamically mount it, whereas a swap partition, you can make that on like an external drive. But as far as your internal drive is concerned, you have to shut down your computer, boot from an OS that's not on that drive, just for like safety reasons.
Not if you had if you had free space, Thomas, you could do it.
Yeah, you could, but your normal user is going to have one operating system on an entire disk, and people like us, we're not your normal users. We're pretty commonly going to have some empty space on our disk, or a partition we could delete from an old OS we were testing, and then we could make an extra swap file or a swap partition, sure. But your normal user, they're going to be much easier. It's going to be much easier for them to make just a swap file, because they don't have to deal with that resizing or anything.
Question on SSDs and swap files, is that contiguous problem not negated by an SSD? Because don't they not suffer from?
Well,
SSDs at all.
It's certainly faster.
No, but I mean, it doesn't suffer.
So it's not.
Oh, right, because it's not a physical. Yeah, it's not written.
Yeah.
Yes.
Technically, fragmentation can still occur on SSDs, but almost always the write and read controllers are way smarter than anything you can do to counter that, and fiddling with it is worse. So,
Harris?
Leveling also, so you don't want to mess with any of the leveling that an SSD does. So I was actually reading when I bought an mSATA drive for my computer. I was reading about how it was a very old article, and I probably should have not done this, but they said to not use the entire disk because I guess if you use the entire thing, it can wear out quicker or something like that. So I said, I'll just put a big swap partition on here, and then that's my chunk I'm technically not using, and
But
so
you are.
I've got a So I got like a 17 or 18 gigabyte swaps partition, I should say. So
But
maybe
that
I'm
is
Linuxing
still-
wrong.
It is still actually using it though. When
Yeah,
they
you
say
have a
leave it,
lot.
they say leave it unformatted.
Yeah.
So that because what happens is as the sectors start to die, the new drives automatically remap to the unused ones, and that's why they say leave some open so that as the disk is going through its self checks and self corrections, it has extra sectors that it can pull in and remap to, rather than lose your information.
I have a question. Has anyone here actually had an SSD fail on them?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like completely die or just degrade?
Most of the
Right.
time, it was really early on when they first came out, and from companies that maybe you wouldn't buy from.
Okay, so has
now.
anyone had like a Samsung Evo, just completely die on them?
I've had a Crucial drive die on me, and that was 60 gig. So that's how old that was. That's
yeah,
modern size drive. That was when that was a good size. I've certainly had hard drives fail
all the time. Yeah.
Drives.
What brand are those?
These are Seagate.
That's why.
Maxtor.
That's why.
Maxtor, wow.
Oh yes, every place.
Here's my point. Here's the point I
My
was
2 gig Maxtor is downstairs in the basement. Sorry.
You'll be pressed to find a Western Digital in there.
The point I was trying to make is that I think people have this slightly unfounded concern that by overutilizing an SSD, that the lifespan is somehow going to dramatically be reduced. If you look at the spec sheets of the read and write cycles and the expected lifespan and do the math of how you use a computer, it's a pretty tall task to wear out an SSD.
Yeah, I mean,
The
I've
new
had
ones, yes.
I've had many SSDs
not
fail
some.
in sectors. So like there have been errors in sectors, and a lot of times that has happened to me right around the partition where the boot is. Like, so it's like I have to. There were times where I would leave a portion of the hard drive untouched and start the partition down further, or not right at the beginning of the drive, just to get around that. So I have had like errors where the drive is unusable, but not that the whole drive failed.
Just to give people an idea as well, I've probably had my oldest SSD for about 6 years now, and it's probably done 500 installs, and it's still going.
Some of the newer SSDs, the way they're made is you have these individual little cells inside the chips, and the newest ones, they have more bits per cell. So the older ones, that's some of the newer ones, but they just came out with 5 bits per cell.
Yeah, the 4 ones are Qs.
Yeah.
Well, back to what I was saying here.
Go ahead.
The older ones that are like 1 or 2 bits per cell, they're capable of lasting much longer, because when you have more bits per cell, the more you read and write to them, the more that cell degrades, and it has to apply more and more voltage in order to read or write to it. And at some point, those bits will start to overlap. So if you only have 1 bit per cell, you're never going to have that overlap. Now, it will eventually degrade to the point where the cells themselves are so degraded that you can't read 2 cells side by side. But when you have like 4 or 5 bits per cell, something like that will degrade much faster than it would to be, like a 2-1.
But even those, Thomas, I don't disagree with you. And you're right, because if you look at the warranties on the newer ones, they're only 3-year versus 5-year.
I was just going to say that.
So I mean, but again, even if you look at that 3-year period, the amount of reads and write even on those those newer, more compressed flash storage modules, like it's still pretty darn high. So
correct me if I'm something that like it's definitely true, but you still need to keep it in mind.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but don't newer SSDs include extra unadvertised space that it can reallocate to? Yeah, that's what I thought.
Actually, that's used for multiple things.
Hold, Thomas, hold on, brother. Let other people talk, okay? All right. Big Pod, go ahead.
Actually, the new SSDs have unprovisioned space, which is used for multiple things like copying during data move, because sometimes it needs to free up space so you can have it on a same flash chip. You have all the data on the same flash chip, so it actually moves around the data, and also that space is used for when it's actually some cells die into that space.
Right. Aris, you wanted to say something?
Yes. For swap space, I have a partition that I use because whenever we try a distro, every distro uses that partition, just depending on what I boot onto. And as far as the SSD and like the leveling, what I like to do is I like to leave it a little bit of space. I leave like 20 gigs there, because I know they say like it's going to distribute the hard drive, the wear for it. But if you're filling up like 60% of the hard drive, 70% of the hard drive, it's only going to work with the last 30% of the actual cells, and you're just going to level out even faster. So what I like to do is I just like to leave a little bit of space that I don't even touch. That way it levels out better that way.
The physical placement, like, so if we're looking at like if it's displayed as like a bar, right, beginning of the disk, the end of the disk, it doesn't actually matter where on that bar anything is at all, because all of this is controlled by the actual write controllers and read controllers on the SSD. That's not even exposed to the system. Doesn't matter where you put it, the SSD does all the math there.
But what I'm saying is if you have, let's say, the full drive and you're copying and deleting the whole drive, that's going to take a lot much longer. But if you fill it up 80% of the way, you're still going to have that 20% just so it uses that, because it's never going to touch that. Because you're limiting yourself the use of the hard drive itself. You're never going to fill up.
Like having less capacity, so like you'll use it less, but that's because you have less. Like,
yeah, you're sort of forcing yourself to use less of the drive. And that way you give more of a buffer so it wears out the drive more evenly.
Why not just buy a smaller drive?
He's talking about reliability.
Anyway, I'm sure we could continue discussing this all night long, but I think Adam, if he's still around, put a really interesting post on game and apps development and why they don't target Linux. Adam, did you want to talk to us about that? I think you put it on the Discourse, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Wasn't really prepared for this. Just kind of eating some Cheez-Its off camera.
And so I had nominated this, and this. So when I talked to Adam earlier,
Yeah, go ahead, Eric.
No, I want Adam to talk about this, but what prompted me to even think about this was the Linux Spotlight with Popey, where Alan was talking about, the pragmatic approach of why companies don't develop for Linux, and just because it's such a small market and it's such a large overhead as an organization to have to deal with. It's not just some developer building a program; they have to support it organization, throughout the entire organization. And that part of the Linux Spotlight was really fascinating to me, because that's not something that you just randomly hear about. And so Adam and I were kind of talking about it, and I think between the two of us, we we've sort of started, hashing out these ideas, and Adam threw a really good post up on Discourse about it. So there you go, Adam.
Yeah, it was kind of long. But yeah, so what prompted me to write it was I saw a lot of outrage, no surprise, on the internet over a developer for a game called Forager dropping Linux support for their game. And the developer didn't cite specifically why they were dropping support for Linux. They stated some stuff about the Mac OS, but I guess they just lumped them together. And I noticed like everybody's response was very, very negative, right? And kind of understandable. Like, hey, they're pulling the rug out from under you, but like that was part of the issue. And I thought, like, I wonder if people realize why developers don't make apps for Linux, right? And the biggest one obviously is market share, from my opinion. Like how are you going to justify building a specific Linux app for so few people, right? But also, I think there's more of a technical side to that as well. Especially in terms of games, for example. A lot of game developers target Windows not just for market share, but the ease of which they can build a game. When they have these kind of monolithic, I don't know what you'd call them, APIs and such, like something like DirectX, for example, which is more than just handling 3D rendering. It handles like input, it handles network stack, it handles a lot of things. They have these like base SDKs and things that they can build off of, and a lot of that is missing in Linux. My best example is the lack of browser video acceleration, for example. Like there's no one way for all the browser folks to target Linux for video acceleration. Do they use FFmpeg? Do they use GStreamer? Do they use any number of these things? And so in Linux, yeah, we have choice, but I can completely understand where if a developer looks at Linux and like, okay, I'm going to make my app or my game for Linux, where do I start? Which of one of these toolkits do I start? On Windows, making a game, it's like, well, I can use Unreal or Unity or whatever. And there's these big packages that come with everything they need. On the Mac, you have SDKs like Core Animation, Core Image, UI Kit, App Kit, things like that. And we don't really have much of that for Linux because we have so much of differentiation, in environments and setups and everything. Like if a developer comes and builds just a regular app, right? I don't know, something like a calendar. Like, do that do GTK? Do I do Qt? Like, which of these is better? Like, if I use Qt, well, there's only certain functionality that's available for Python that I know, or there's only certain functionality that's available for Vala in GTK or whatever the case may be. And that's more like a technical argument for why it would be difficult to develop for Linux. Like, how would you go about targeting Linux as a whole especially when your users are saying like, they use the GTK, they use Qt. So the symptom to this problem is Electron. Like so many people rail against Electron, and yeah, it has its issues, but Electron is a set of tools, a set of like APIs, a set of everything they can build against that's going to work on Windows, Mac, Linux. They don't have to do anything extra. They don't have to do anything special. And that's kind of what they have. So when I see, things like Proton, for example, or even the Steam runtime in some ways, like these are sort of SDKs that I use SDK loosely here, that a developer can target when building their game. And you have sort of this static target of like, okay, well, I'm going to build my game to work against like Proton 411. And you can build your game for Windows and you can do some testing on the side to make sure it still works in Proton. And you don't have to drive so much effort into a Linux specific version. That's a good thing. But the social side of that argument that I was making is that we have so many people that go out and say, oh, it's not native, I'm not buying it. Well, okay, that's an unfortunate realization, huh? And the others is like, CD Projekt Red is a great example. They brought, using a third party, using a wine wrapper at the time, because Proton wasn't even anything at the time, they brought Witcher 2 to the Linux platform. people complained that Witcher 2 performance was awful. And certainly it was. It was awful in Windows. I just want you all to know. But, they went ahead and people railed and yelled and everything. And CD Projekt Red was like, well, that's an interesting reaction to us bringing you a game. Not going to do that again. So then when Witcher 3 came along, they were like, no. And now they actually troll Linux users on Twitter. I believe there was a back and forth between the Witcher team and the Cyberpunk team, and they're asking like, where's your dignity at? And the Cyberpunk team said, oh, it's over there by the Linux version of Cyberpunk. So like,
yep.
Yeah, but when you have that kind of social reaction to game devs or any app developer or whatever, and I know you've all heard it. It's like, oh, hey, there's this really cool mail client you guys should try out. Oh, really? Is it what's it made of? Oh, it's Electron. Oh, so it's not a real app, and it's like, really? Like,
yeah, that's exactly what you hear. That's exactly what you hear.
That's what you're doing. It's not native. It's Electron. Well, it's on Linux, so what? You can either have it or not. Like, so that was kind of my post to kind of bring to light, like, why people, before people think, hey, like, why is this not on Linux? Or why can't they just bring this to Linux? Why can't they bring Photoshop to Linux, or whatever the case may be? Like, there are a lot of hurdles that not only did they have to overcome in terms of, business and marketing and support and everything else, but also in terms of technical reasons. And, what do they target? How do they build their toolkit? What are they using? And then the social reasons of, oh, we brought Photoshop to Linux. Ooh, it's proprietary. Like, what do you do?
Well, the same reaction you get with FreeOffice. It's the same. It's the same reaction. It's a paid thing. We don't want it. It's proprietary. We don't want it in the. Look, the idea that Manjaro did by working with FreeOffice to bring that into the distro, we would never have that option to save files in those formats if they didn't work with FreeOffice to begin with. So it's like that connection has to be made where, again, we always talk about apps not working on Linux, and then when we go to work with developers on apps for Linux, we get all freaked out because it's proprietary software. There has to be some give and take here.
So I feel like a lot of this is the case, and I know Alan and Martin talk about this a lot when they talk about Unity, is the case of those that have something to complain about tend to be the loudest. Like when Unity was introduced, people complained about it. When Unity was replaced with Gnome, those that liked Unity complained about it.
Well, Alan, you mentioned going as a representative for Snaps to developers and saying, how can we help you get your software on Linux, and maybe not getting as much interest as you had hoped for. I'm not trying to bait you or feed you into a conversation, but those were the things I was taking away from your Linux spotlight, like I said. So
yeah, there's been multiple occasions where we've spoken to developers who have applications, and we've said, "Hey, yo, bring it to Linux." And sometimes it depends. It really depends on the developer, and some of them will just flat out say no. Yeah, we're not going to do that. And we've had phone calls, hangouts with these developers, developers you have heard of, with applications probably that you already have installed. And we have hangouts with them and ask them, what are your problems? Can we help solve them? And often they might say you're bottom of the priority list simply because you don't have enough users. It's as simple as that. It's just a numbers game. And if a developer has 90% of their audience using Windows and 8% of their audience using a Mac and 2% using Linux, who do you think they're going to focus on? Like, it makes sense. Like, if you've got 1 million Windows users and you've got a few thousand Linux users, and the 1 million users are calling for a feature or calling for you to fix some bug, you're going to address their bugs first because there's a lot of them, and you could, make a lot of people happy with that bug fix or with that extra feature. Or you could focus on fixing something for the Linux users, and there might be a few people who say thanks, and then the rest of them who still get angry at you for whatever other reason. So it's a numbers game.
Yep. And again, it all comes down to money too. They have to have the resources to put it on Linux. And again, we go back to that whole argument, that circular argument of there's not enough, number one, users itself to be on Linux, but users that will pay for software on Linux as well.
But even those who do choose to come to Linux, like these game developers, they then realize like, wow, that was a lot of effort because the tools are just not up to par, or the delivery of it is not up to par. It's maybe these libraries, are just not as robust as something you might find on Windows. Maybe like SDL just doesn't quite cut it, or they can't figure out Vulkan, so they're using OpenGL. Like any of these reasons why the game developers struggle, they brought their product to Linux, so they like, okay, these people might be worth targeting. But then when they realize the technical hurdles that they get on the platform, on top of the social hurdles they get on the platform, they're like, maybe I won't do this again.
Yeah, and there's plenty of occasions over, you could go back over the last 5 to 10 years. There's plenty of occasions where app developers or game developers, I'll kind of separate them like that, have written up their experiences in blog posts. And you'll find Linux users tearing them apart because, it's your fault because you decided to base on Ubuntu, or it's your fault because you use GTK, or your fault because you're using SDL 1.2 and you should use SDL 2. And it's like, that doesn't help. These comments on these blog posts that say, it's your fault. You brought the software to Linux, but you did it badly. It's your fault. How is that going to help? That's why, when me and Martin do our job, we generally have private conversations with people. Because if we go, I'll give you a classic example. If I go to an issue tracker on a piece of software, and I post an issue saying, hey, it'd be really good if this came to Linux. We can help you make a snap. We can help you deliver it and promote it. Guarantee 100%. There'll be comments underneath saying, don't do that, make a flat pack. And then there'll be other comments that say, don't do that, make an app image. And here's the reasons why. They're evil. Don't use their stuff, right? And the reason we don't do it in the public is because of those conversations. It just pushes people away. And they're like, well, you guys clearly can't sort yourselves out, so we're not going to bother bringing software to Linux. So we email developers privately and say, hey, we'd like to help you. And if they decide to make a flat pack or an app image, that's fine. That's not a problem. It really isn't a problem. We just want more software to come to Linux. And that dogpiling of people in the community who have strong opinions about something and wade in, telling you you're wrong, really puts people off.
I think you're wrong.
No, but it is true. It's a shame because people, there are some people out there who generally just want to argue about things. There are other people out there who are genuinely trying to make good points about whether it be app images or flat packs or snaps, but it's just done in the wrong way, and it doesn't help anything. So,
yeah, and talking about the numbers game thing you were saying. If you look at like the Windows gaming, I'm excluding consoles here because it's not really relevant. But if you look at like Windows in terms of gamers, there's tons of really toxic, vitriolic Windows gamers, right? But there's also like millions of Windows gamers, and the same like number, not percentage, but number of people are upset in Windows. But there's a larger number who aren't. Whereas in Linux, there's a smaller number of us, but that percentage of angry people is a lot larger.
Yep. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up. It's time to go. That 2 hours went like that.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody gets the last word. PZ?
Well, I'd just like to thank the Manjaro team for bringing us such a great distro. Really enjoy using it. And And now I'm in that conundrum of if peppermint goes, what do I use? There's at least half a dozen that I could turn to now that work really well. A big thanks to Rocco for bringing us this lug every week. It really is the highlight of my week. And we haven't done it in quite a while, so a big shout out to OggCamp 19. It's going to be happening over the weekend of the 19th and 20th of October. So if you're in the UK and Europe, don't be square, get to OggCamp.
Nice. Derek, last word.
Oh, thank you again for having me. I just got a new GPU, so I'm real happy to be playing games now. If anyone wants to add me, they can. I'm Derek A. Graham. That's Derek A. Graham 78.
Very nice. Nate, GI Nate, how are you?
Great. Maybe I should change my name today.
Last word.
I don't know. Thank you so much for having us here, and that I get to talk to all my nerdy friends. So it's a good time. I enjoy it. Thank you.
Dan?
Yes. Thank you, as always, Rocco, and thanks, Zeb. Thanks for everything you guys do. And yeah, thanks to the Manjaro team. Look forward to doing some more testing this week. And yeah, thanks to Eric for everything he does in Discourse and the website. So that's that.
Eris, last word.
Thank you very much for the stream. I'll continue testing Manjaro. I did like Awesome, though, the Awesome version, even though it didn't work. I prefer it over the i3 version. I think I like the panel better than the i3 one. I wish it would have worked better, but I think they're still like trying to do a final release for the new version.
Dig it. Tyler, last word.
Thanks for the show as always. It's good to be back. I know I had about a month's absence on here, and
You
I
did,
look forward to
dude.
being back next week.
You did. So I hope you're back next week because, there's too much absence going on. Thomas, last word.
Well, thanks for having me on again this week. Sorry for my little outburst of hardware enthusiasm. Manjaro, great distro, even though I didn't get to test it very much. As I always say, there's no such thing as a bad distro, except for Ultimate Edition. That just... beyond that, won't be here this week because my mother's dragging me on a trip. Hey! Other than that, check out DroggerOS at droggeros.org and have a good night.
Dig it. Eric, last word.
Well, I'm glad you made it, Rocco. It's good to see you. We thought we weren't going to have you this week. And thanks to everybody engaging in discussion. I literally wait all week to sit here and have these conversations with you guys. I really do. Because who else am I going to talk to about this stuff, I do want to say that we're, the betas for 1910 Ubuntu are out. And if you have any interest, it's a good time to grab one or many and give them a shot. I've been installing them on hardware and having some great experiences. The new NVIDIA 435 driver gives you an offload option. So it's got Prime support, which is something I've been waiting for a long time, and it's working really well. So super cool stuff. And this is the cycle where if we can give them feedback, they can fix the issues before the release. So if you can do it, do it.
Dig it. Dave.
Thank you, Rocco and Zeb, for this wonderful stream. Thank you to the Manjaro developers for a great product. And folks, be willing to pay for good software.
Ding, ding, ding. Colin, last word.
Well, tonight must have been very familiar conversations to you tonight, Rocco. There was a bit of a tug of war happening there tonight.
Wow.
So
Wow.
I don't mean to open a can of worms, but is it Manjaro or Manjaro?
It would be depends on where you come from.
Thanks as always, Rocco. It's always good to join here. Looking forward to giving Manjaro a bit of a shake this week. So I have a few things to say about that next week, but looks like it just works anyway. Thank you, Zeb. And Eric, you do some great stuff on the Discourse website. So that's pretty awesome. I haven't mentioned that before, but it's awesome stuff. And thanks, Dan, as well, because all you guys are sharing who's next, I noticed, between the 4 years. So, yeah, you seem to get it done pretty well. So see you all next week. Thanks.
We're working on it. Chris, last word.
Well, I have to say, as I remember when I was a kid and we had a church picnic going on and had tug of war going on, my dad's team tied the rope around the tree, so we were never able to win. But that and the fact that we had 127 people watching, we're down a little bit, but from that, and we only have 28 likes. Come on, people, click that like button. Help the YouTube algorithm notice the stream so we can get more people enjoying our weekly conversations. And I really do enjoy being here. Even if I don't say much till the after show, but I learn a lot, and I've been learning more and getting an idea how people use a desktop Linux versus my background of coming from an enterprise situation and tailoring what it is for my users, why they are still resisting using the Linux machine instead of wanting Windows. With that, we'll see you next week, and everybody have a safe time. It's starting to get a little colder in the North America, or Northern Hemisphere, so stay warm, stay well, and watch out for those sicknesses.
Barbara, last word.
Okay, as always, I want to thank Rocco and everybody else. I do look forward to this every week. And the one thing I thought we were going to do, maybe we'll put it off for next week, was our favorite podcast.
Barbara, you didn't remind me.
I wasn't told that I had to remind you.
Barbara, next week, it's your job to
Yes.
remind me about the favorite podcasts.
I will
And
put
do
a big
not let your dog distract you from it.
Yeah, no, she's in the other room. She got bored with me.
You are so right. I forgot about that.
Yeah,
Sheesh.
I mean, I have my list, and it's like I couldn't just narrow it down to 3 to 5.
Okay,
I have
that's
my
okay.
topic. I have my topic. But anyway, so next week, right?
Next week.
I will
You
put a
remind me.
I will put a post-it on my laptop to remind myself, to remind you.
Dan?
Barbara, you beat me to the podcast. That was stuck in the back of my head for the last 15 minutes.
It took me so long to just figure out which ones I wanted to say were my top 3 or 5 in whatever category.
I barely know what a podcast is.
Oh.
Well, anyways, Rocco, I'm glad that you could make it here with us this week as usual. And I want to thank all the knowledgeable people that showed up and shared all their knowledge on certain subjects that we talked about. It's very educational to me, and I'm sure it's very educational to the people that watch this. So with that said, I pass it on to Chicken.
Front row. Thank you guys for being here and chatting. Like the discussion was both informative and perspective building. I learned some stuff, I learned, that we're all a little crazy, and that's cool. And it's really nice to see Popey here. Don't get to chat with you all that often, but it's great having you here. And yeah, see you guys next week as well.
Alan, last word?
Eric completely stole my last word. Yes, the betas of 1910 are out. And the reason why it's important for people to test this stuff out is because there is a team of dedicated people at Canonical who want to fix stuff. And if people don't tell us what's broken, we can't possibly fix it. And while Twitter is awesome, posting screenshots of stuff that's busted on Twitter won't find its way to the developers. So I would strongly recommend learning how to file a bug And if you need help doing that, just ping me, I guess, on Twitter or Telegram or wherever. And I can help people file bugs in the right places. So, yeah, I'm offering support to help those people who've never done it before file a bug.
And I can testify he's a great teacher.
Oh, stop it.
Vince, last word.
I was ready for the podcast, dude, because I was going to cheat. I was going to actually sneakily mention, even though it's not in the rules, telecast with Popey. Awesome. He actually gave a really big shout out to Bill in one of the episodes.
Yeah,
it was. I think it was too modest to say anything. But thank you, Rocco, Zeb, label yourself, Dan and Eric. Thank you. I love chatting to you guys, and to anyone who misses chatting to us on the show, Telegram. That's awesome. I'm always hanging out in there as well.
Very nice. Big Pod, last word.
Thanks for having me. And Colin, since you mentioned if it is Manjaro or Mahara, why is it Manjaro?
Adam.
Hey, thanks for the show. Always fun. Thanks everybody who showed up. Deb, Dan, everybody who does a good job on this. And Fedora 31 beta is out as well, including Silverblue. So I'm just saying, I might be on Silverblue. I'm not saying anything, but
Throwing it out there. Tony, last word.
Yeah, thank you, Rocco and Zed and everybody else that's here tonight. I got a couple of things to say. One, I'm a normal user, so I'm one of those people when they're talking about normal users, that's who I am. Pretty much, if the stuff works when I open the computer, I'm good. So I'm going to keep using the FreeOffice for a while. I've used LibreOffice for the longest time, but FreeOffice seems to be doing everything I need it to do right now. So, and I think one of the things that normal users, we're going to use what works, whether it's like popular demand or whatever. I use whatever works for me, so I'm going to keep using that. And I tried out Gnome Manjaro this week, but next week I think I'm going to try out KDE because I may be switching over to it permanently. So we'll see how it goes from there. Thanks again.
Well, you'll have to tell us about it next week.
Oh, I will.
Bill, last word.
I was very tardy, but thank you, Rocco and Zeb and Eric and Dan and everyone else. Linux Spotlight, the last two with Nate and Alan have been fabulous. To just say one thing about the betas that are going on. If you have any interest in ZFS, this week coming up, it's going to be in many, if not all, of the betas. So if you have any interest in it, it's going to be there in experimental form. Please test it, feedback. I know it's not butter, Nate, but it's pretty good. So
where can I get info on that, Bill? Like if I did want to test it out.
I know Mate's been early this week is going to have it. I'll put something in the Telegram channel if I see something that comes.
Maybe something on Discourse.
Yeah, as soon as I get a note of when it's going to be available, I'll put something up.
Okay, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, that is going to wrap it up for us. Again, if you haven't,
Linux Spotlight, man.
I said I'm getting there.
Okay.
If you haven't seen the Linux Spotlight with Cubicle Nate, you need to go watch it because it was a really good episode. The one before that, like Bill said, was with Popey, and that was an excellent episode as well. The upcoming Linux Spotlight this Wednesday at 6 a.m. I know everybody is waiting for this episode of Michael Tennell of Destination Linux. So there you go. He had to be episode 18. And there's a reason for that. We'll get into that. But
I'll schedule my day for that.
It's going to be released 10 hours late.
Right?
7 hours stream.
But I do want to thank the Manjaro developers for not just making a distro, but being part of the community and making decisions for the distro with the community in mind. And that's something that you don't always see. So that is much appreciated. All right, that's going to do it for us. We will be back next week to give our final thoughts on Manjaro 18.1.0. But until then, long live Linux.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
See ya.
Good night.
Good night.